Thanks for joining us as we examine a forgotten war, a 1,000-year forgotten war, otherwise known as
the perennial clash between Islam and the West.
Yeah, this is something that's kind of, well, it's sort of like that. You got a buffet that's set up, and everybody has everything. It's laid out very nicely. Everybody brings a dish. It's like a potluck. Everybody brings it, and then
it sounds so wholesome.
Aunt Mildred brings her favorite dish, cow tongue, and it is over there on this side, and everybody's avoiding that. And I think this is one of those topics that we gently and gingerly walk around and avoid for several reasons. We're going to look at what some of those reasons might be, why people avoid it. My name is John Newton, and I'm a science fiction author, and I'm joined by
Eric from Your Brother in Christ.
And we're going to dig into this topic using a book written by Raymond Ibrahim, the Defenders of the West, the Christian heroes who stood against Islam. So that is the...
It's impressive you had that whole thing memorized. You could just do it off the top of your head.
I didn't have to look at the cover at all for that. You're right. But this is... So the goal of what we're doing is last week we looked at just war theory. And we went through at least the tenets of it to say, all right, in the West, in Christian philosophy and Western philosophy, you have these rules, these guidelines that are set up for what is considered a just war. You don't hear a whole lot about it right now when a Western state goes to war, but you do hear parts of it that come out, like limited civilian casualties and other things like that do garner what a just war would be. But we're going to look at wars during the Middle Ages, specifically those that would be of the Crusades or other things like that. And we'll apply a little bit of the just war theory to that. But more importantly, we're going to look at 8 individuals who stood up as leaders during that time and take a look at, I believe that they should in some ways, not all of them, because there's at least one in there that's an oddball. We're not going to say who it is yet, but they should be looked at as being an example of leadership and courage, especially in the face of adversity. And so we're going to step through each one of those. But before we do, we got to get a background for it. We're going to talk about this conflict and frame it in such a way that when we introduce these 8 men in the next few weeks, we'll have a bit of context for them. Then we'll also have context for each one, because where they, the lives that they lived, the challenges that they had, the wars that were going on that time, why they stood up in the face of adversity like they did. So all those questions will be answered with those. So Defenders of the West, Christian heroes who stood against Islam. Brief background about the author, Raymond Ibrahim. He's a Middle East scholar and a Coptic Christian. That's the background that he has. He has been, there's several different videos of interviews that he has that are out on the internet right now. I believe that D. Wood had spoken
just live streamed with him yesterday.
Seriously, yesterday? Because there was a video.
I think it was last night or the night before.
Okay, so
one of the two.
All right, so there was one. I saw the two together. It's kind of surprised a little.
Very recent.
I shouldn't have been surprised, to tell you the truth. I shouldn't have been surprised at all. But anyway, I saw an interview that they had together. There's another book. There's actually several other books he has out. There's a predecessor to this one called Sordid Scimitar, which he looks at the specific conflicts. In this one, he's looking at individuals who made big strides during that era. Ibrahim sets up. When I first looked at that name and I looked at the author, I thought, oh, this is going to be from a Muslim perspective.
Yeah, not so much.
No. Not at all.
Not so much. No, he gets it. Yeah. He really has a great, firm understanding of this, mostly because he saw it firsthand. But it is, for me, coming from the apologetic side, doing the discussions with Muslims, having debates with them, It's very refreshing actually to go through here. And he's like, yep, this is here. This is here. This is where it says it here in the Quran. This is Hadith. Here's where this, this is exactly what they were talking about here in this reference. And it's like, yes.
Yeah. Cool. And that's one of the reasons why I think as Westerners, especially now in this modern era, want to avoid that topic and view these things with kid gloves, and to cast one group as being the villains and the others as being, let's just say the religion of peace, which the further you dig into history, you find out.
Not even close. Maybe religion of pieces. Sure. Peace over there, and peace up there.
That's right.
That's how close it gets.
So we'll be discussing he discusses in the book, he discusses the historical conflict between Islam and the West, emphasizing the concept of jihad as a driving force behind Islamic expansion. And he argues that this history is often forgotten and modern discourse leading to a misunderstanding about the nature of the past and present conflict. So we're still in a lot of that conflict.
No. Yeah. Ever since Islam took the center stage, it has been a cancer upon humanity.
So there are different times, ebbs and flows, where there are parts where it doesn't look like there's a physical conflict maybe in a certain region for a time, but then it encroaches maybe in different ways. And we're not going to so much talk about the ways in modern today that it's happening, but we're going to look during basically about 1,000-year period from about the 700s, the 7th century, sorry, the 600s, 7th century to the 17th century. And that doesn't mean that it stopped. It just means that that's this particular period, and these men who stood up against it, what their roles were in that process.
And it's interesting to see, because some of these tactics Muslims are using in this book and in history are the same they're using today.
Right.
It is. It's very obvious once you actually start diving into it.
So we call this a perennial clash, and just to make sure that we're using the terms, that's the term Ibrahim uses, Raymond uses in his book for the introduction, calling it a perennial clash. That term, as it's being used here, is to say it's ongoing, it's long lasting, and just like over and over and over and over and over again. And in fact, if you look at the beginning of the conflict between the East and the West, it was not the West that was invading the East. In fact, the West was already there. We call the West, which is Christendom. Some of the most well-established churches, some of the richest heritage of Christianity. You had Antioch, you had Alexandria, you had all these places which would now be considered Middle East. And we would just, growing up, you ask most people on the streets if they know their geography, which is a big question, but if they know their geography, they might point to that and say, oh, that's Muslim territory, or it's Islamic, if they were to say any kind of culture or religion associated with it.
Yeah. So from the very beginning, from even during the life of Muhammad, he's conquering. There are no native cities in Islam. They've all been conquered in one way or the other, including Mecca and Medina. They were both conquered through conquest. Now, that being said, the two superpowers at a time were the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire, both fighting each other. Didn't give a rat's rear end about these people in the middle of nowhere. They're a bunch of desert people who no one cared about. As far as, conquering and taking over their territory, they were too busy fighting each other. And then Islam expands and starts taking on both sides and ends up just pillaging and plundering because they were too busy fighting each other at the time to really notice. Well, I mean, they noticed, but not as severe. They didn't realize how bad Islam really was.
Yeah. So, with this clash that we're talking about, it's like Eric was just saying, it's not just religious. It's like, oh, we're going to convert your people and stuff like that. We're going to talk to them and we're going to convince them that our way is right, which is my preferred way of doing it. It's not just that. It's historical civilization structure, and military. Military is involved with it as well. You could just see where sweeping by the conversion by the sword. And as we go through and we look at these different individuals, we'll hit the struggles that they had. And the reason why they got involved was because of this encroachment, this invasion that was happening. And the culture that was being flipped on its head with everything. So we dive into these individual stories. We'll pull some of that out. I would say that a lot of it is probably not YouTube safe. Probably have to tone some of it down. And
I wouldn't, but this isn't my channel now.
Well, yeah, I'll try to say as much as I can. I would reference you back to the book if you want to get more details. He does a lot of there's a lot of footnotes. Primary sources that's primarily what he goes to. He doesn't refer to a lot of modern scholars or commentaries. He goes directly to the primary sources, which I believe that you should be doing anyway, because you're seeing it from their point of view. Could that point of view be skewed? Sure.
He's also fluent in Arabic, so he's got the original sources. And he's also got that's one of the stuff that he was pulling up with David last time, with some of the hadith that aren't yet translated.
Oh,
it's still bad. It gets so much worse.
Oh, okay.
When you think you've got to the end of the debauchery within Islam?
Well, speaking of which, let's take something that is not even in the hadith. Let's take a look at something that's in the Quran itself. Why was there the expansion? I'm going to quote Quran 9, 5, 5 and 6. So ayah 5 and 6, or verse 5 and 6. But once, and not just doing 5, but also 6 also. But once the sacred months have passed, kill the polytheists who have violated their treaties, wherever you find them. Capture, just a minute, I'll get to that. Capture them, besiege them, and lie in wait for them on every way. But if they repent, perform prayers, and pay alms tax, the jizya, and set them free. Indeed, Allah is forgiving, most merciful. Actually, that wasn't be jizya. I'm sorry, I misquoted that. There you go.
Yep. Well,
there was a misquote in there. Did you catch the misquote?
No.
This is according to Quran.com. Okay. And they put in there.
Oh, the parentheses.
Yes, a
clarification.
There's a clarification.
Perfectly clear book.
That's in English, but not in Arabic. Yep. Right?
Clarification for the perfectly clear book.
Perfectly clear. And the clarification is this: but once the sacred months have passed, kill the polytheists who have violated their treaties, quote unquote, wherever you find them. That who violated their treaties, which puts it in an immediate context of those who have done something bad. Say, these guys only do this, is not in the original, and it's not how it is treated.
No.
Through the large part of Islam around the world.
Now, you might get a pushback from Muslims saying that this only referred to a specific treaty in... Oh, sorry. No. Sorry, I've debated enough Muslims on this topic to know this by heart.
That's who violated the treaties, which is not in there, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically kill the polytheists wherever you find them.
Yeah, and the whole, even referring back to the treaty, going back to the treaty of Medina, which is the one that there was a treaty there between Muhammad and the Jews in the area. Even if you try to pull that up, the treaty didn't actually exist by historical standards. There's no actual evidence that it ever actually existed. So that backing doesn't work. And then you've got Quran 929 just further down from this. Believe me, I've gone through with a Muslim from Quran 9:1 to 20 live. And it meanders. It's all over the place, back and forth. So, no, it's not very clear on what the actual address is. But Quran 929 specifically orders all Muslims to go conquer the entire world and either enslave, kill, or convert all non-Muslims.
Okay, so both verse or ayah 5 and 29 say go do this.
929. Right? Well, yes. in 9
in Quran
5.
9.
Yep.
Verse. Did I say 9? I meant to say verse 5.
Yeah.
Sorry. Verse 5 and 29 both say goodness.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's very clear,
So
and we even know, based upon the writings of Abu Bakr and Uthman and Ali and Umar, the companions of Muhammad, how they applied this after Muhammad's death once they became in power. This was their backing to call jihad against the Christians and the Jews that were, well, the Christians and the Jews on one side, and then the polytheists on the other side. Again, these were unprovoked attacks. They were not going in and invading Muslim land. It was the Muslims came out of the desert and started conquering city after city.
Right, right. And you could look at, I think it would be wise if next time I had a map there graphically showing the advance of Islam.
Oh yeah, it's horrendous.
With all the, and these are, remember, just war, it's a defensive war or defending someone else who is being attacked. These were not defensive wars.
Not anywhere close. This was forced conversion on a global scale. And again, those come, even the writings that we have, the sayings from Abu Bakr and the other companions all come from the Hadith, which are dated 200 years afterwards.
So this is the understanding of jihad. I know that in modern contexts, this is sometimes said as a personal struggle. You know, you're battling whatever issues that you're going through. But that is not how it has been understood throughout the ages, and in very large parts of the world right now. There is a sustained struggle for dominance, with Islam conquering whatever territory it can against whatever other religion or culture or government is there, because Islam is not just a religion. It is a culture. It is a government structure. It is an entire way of life that dominates everything, thinking, including how to go to the bathroom. So it does.
I just watched not too long ago a Muslim imam teaching young boys how to correctly poop and put their hands in the right position, so they were like Muhammad, in how to crap. Yep, every aspect. And again, a concept which is within Islam is that the first generation of Muslims were the best example of Muslims. They were the best. And these are the people who interpreted this as war, as jihad, took these verses and said, this is war against the infidel. We need to spread it by the sword everywhere we go. If that's who you say is below Muhammad, because Muhammad would be on top, and then you'd have everyone else underneath from the first generation, then I gotta say that they probably understood Muhammad's teachings better than someone that's 1,400 years after the fact.
That could be. Modern rewriting of history is not reserved just for the West.
That, and it was his own father-in-law, Muhammad's own father-in-law, that didn't. So yeah.
So I got a comment here from Thomas Hall. He says, "Do you think the parentheticals in the English are?" And I'm assuming this is for Quran 9:5. Parentheticals in the English are intended for Muslim readers or to deceive non-Muslims. Who is the translation meant for?
I'd say both, to deceive both, because I don't think it is to deceive one or the other. I think it is to deceive those, because again, we're dealing with an authoritative culture, so that whatever the Muslim scholars say goes, or whatever the imam says goes. So yeah, it's, you don't look into it yourself. You don't do your research. I've had a lot of conversations with Muslims on the street that just, I don't know this stuff. I don't look into it. I don't actually read it in any language that I can comprehend. I just repeat the empty sounds and then follow whatever my imam,
because that's what's required of you.
That's what's required.
It's not so much to understand.
Nope.
It's not to have a personal relationship. It's
no need for critical thinking.
I'm gonna this next one up, and I do not recognize this. What would you say? Artrix 548. It's ironic considering plenty of Muslims today are embarrassed by the Hadith accounts of Muhammad's sins and are either try to hide or justify them through Western lens.
Oh yeah,
that is entirely. And I think that's why there's this parenthetical statement here, because you're avoiding saying no, it's not that. It's just for this one.
Only when they violate the treaties. Well, no, that's not what the Arabic actually says there, and definitely with Quran 9:29, it specifically says the Arabic means fight to kill the unbelievers, but they'll try to say, well, it's just meaning to struggle. Just a struggle with them about concepts that you can then talk about and engage with peacefully. It's like, no, it literally means to kill them.
Yeah. So we're going to look at a couple of quotes here that are from the book. Raymond Ibrahim quotes a couple of these guys. I'm going to bring them up. So we're looking at defending the West. We have certain individuals, and there's a European historian, Hilaire Belloc, 1938, said the West has forgotten about Islam. They have never come into contact with it. They take for granted that it is decaying. In that, anyway, is just a foreign religion that will not concern them. It is, as a fact, the most formidable and persistent enemy which our civilization had and may at any moment become as large a menace in the future as it has been in the past. The final fruit of this tenacity, the second period of Islamic power, may be delayed, but I doubt whether it can be permanently postponed. This is 1938. So I think we could say it was during a lull then.
Well, let's see. Go back. So 1938, World War II?
Just before World War II. This is during the Great Depression. So the Ottoman Empire would have been around. No, I'm sorry. The Ottoman Empire is gone.
It just crumbled.
After World War I. And that in itself
instilled Jerusalem yet.
No, it was the Protectorate.
Something.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to place this guy in his actual historical. A couple of mentions. I do disagree with him on one point. That's just he mentions that it is the culture or his nation.
Let me bring that up again. I'm sorry.
Bring it back up. I would disagree with that and say humanity, not just that, but humanity in general, including the Muslims. Islam is cancerous to the Muslims just as much as it is to any, even more than to the disbelievers. It might be surprising to say that, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, imagine what he would say of today. Not only that we have,
it says this is people then. He was saying people then think that Islam is, now this is during a bunch of, in the West, secularism is hitting a peak. Say we can throw off the chains of God. In the West, it's no longer needed. And in the East, this is all superstition. Everybody's going to be enlightened through secularism, and there's a bright, sunshiny future ahead of us. And we can look at examples like everybody living together under communism, for example, and how beautiful and wonderful it is.
Yeah, except for
more people died under communism than they did under Nazism in the 20th century.
Even with those numbers, I would still say Islam is the greater threat than even communism. After reviewing the actual numbers, yeah.
Well, if you look over history, definitely it has more historical life.
I'm talking about grades of black at this point. So you got like communism, and then you got like Islam right here, and then you got like actual humanitarian aid like way up here. So it's close.
Yes.
But
yes,
I think Islam is still and currently is the more drastic threat to humanity.
Well, we can look at what's happening in Europe right now. And again, the point of this discussion is not to talk about present day, although we're looking at the past to understand that some of the struggles we're looking at right now have been going on for a very long time. And this quote is eerily prophetic there in the last bit. So there's another one here, and this is from Winston Churchill. He says, if you will not fight, if you will not fight for the right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it is better to perish than to live as slaves. And he said this 10 years after the historian that we just looked at had his quote. So these are both quotes out of this book, Defenders of the West, and in the introduction. And I think that this quote from Winston Churchill could be said for any threat, civilizational on a civilizational level. It could be atheism, it could be communism, it could be Islam. Put that in there. And there's a couple of other ideologies that are floating around right now, which threaten civilization in many other ways. So you could maybe stack those up. He'd be rolling
in his grave right now if you knew what was going on with everything in England, what he loved.
Oh yeah,
how they have torn it apart and torn it asunder. And you know what? Muslims will come in, and prominent Muslims have called him a war criminal. William Churchill. That comes from Winston. Sorry,
it's okay.
Winston Churchill. That comes straight from Muhammad Hijab on British television, and no one defended him. No one defended that really hard, saying, no, that's absolutely wrong. How dare you say that about a war hero?
So, and not only would he be rolling his grave, but we also have the 8 defenders that are being spoken about in this book. And let me just real quickly going through who these are. We're going to be doing, for the next few weeks, we're going to do one a week and talk about each of these defenders, what their circumstances were, what their lives were like, why they did what they did. And some of the things they did, I don't think are, they're not wholly not defensible. They're living a different era. I'm not the judge. I can't be looking at that, but I will definitely say that they stood up against the encroach of Islam. So of those 8, we have Duke Godfrey, who we're going to do next week, El Cid, or the Cid, Rodrigo. That's also in my book, by the way. King Richard, the Lionheart, Ferdinand III of Castile, Louis IX of France, John Hunyadi, Skenderbeg, and Count Vlad II of Wallachia. So each one of those we're going to spend a week on. And we're also going to go back and have a part 2 to the just war doctrine that we started last week with David S. And hopefully you'll be here for the next one, because we had a really good debate. If you haven't caught that yet, do it. It was a good exchange, I think.
Oh yeah. So we'll be talking. What will we be talking about?
We're going to be talking on that one. We're going to be talking about. So we went over the just war doctrine, what it was, and the next thing that we're going to be doing is going to where its origins were and how it was applied in Scripture, if it was applied in Scripture, and then we could also look at the idea is then to look at it for these 8 defenders and during the Crusades and see if just war doctrine held during that time. I haven't gone through it all, so there might be some surprises here as we go through. We're also going to be looking at the Islamic version of the just war doctrine, which I think is probably going to be the most entertaining of them all. It's going to be
interesting to compare Islamic just war to the Western concept, or basically Christian just war. Because that's what it comes down to. It comes out of the values of Christianity.
Correct. So we do have, I want to show you real quick what those are. This is what we had covered last week. These are not hard and fast rules. These are something that has gone through over time, developed through St. Augustine and others, even some Greek and some Roman thought that went into this. But eventually, this is something that's gone over in the three different categories. I have it color coded here. The lighter color is what would happen just before the war, what happened during the war, and then what happened after the war. So going through this real quick, a just cause, like a defense. It's a defensive war. I'm not going through all the different possibilities, but that's one of them. A legitimate authority. That I can't go into Canada and say, and they say in customs, they say, do you have anything to declare? And I say, yeah, war. That's not going to work.
You might actually win.
They might take me seriously. Hopefully not. Then a high probability of success. it's not a just war if you go in there and you totally decimate your people for some stupid, you didn't count the cost first. Last resort, all the diplomacy has gone through. Proportionality, in other words, the benefits outweigh the harms. Limited civilian casualties. You're going to try to keep that to a minimum, but you won't be able to do it totally, especially if the enemy is shooting rockets from the top of schools or hospitals. Well, we haven't seen that all in recent history. Limited means. You're not going to nuke somebody back to the Stone Age just because, they encroach territory. You're just going to be limited. And no war crimes that are going to be in there. And that's what is the definition of war crimes. So then after that, you have the restoration of peace and order in the country, punishment of war crimes, and rehabilitation and reconstruction. If you can. We're not talking about nation building here, but you go and wipe them out, and hopefully it'll be something like Japan by the time we're done after World War II, something along those lines. So that's what we covered last week. We're going to go into sometime in the next few weeks. We're going to be going into the history behind some of these, why they came in, why they were added, and then, like I said, applying it. And then having the fun part, and we're going to make a chart. We're going to compare these to the Islamic version and say, okay,
do they match up?
What would be the
morality version continue on through?
What would they consider a just cause? At the very least, that would be, I think, a whole live stream in itself. But so of the 8 that I mentioned, we had Artix. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I know it's just a moniker, but still. Charles Martel is a pretty good example as well. Yes, I would agree 100%. And there is Mr. Ibrahim goes through why he chose those 8 in a previous book, The Sword and Scimitar. It does cover, I think it was a Battle of Tours with Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer. He does go over that, so he does talk about him there, and that's why he didn't repraise him in here. But you're right, he is. Thank God for that, because the French may have had, at the very least, Islamic influence like Spain, but at the worst.
Hey, according to someone in history, if it wasn't for Charles, then we would have all been converted over, and it would have been much better to be converted to that Mohammedan religion for his goals. Oh, wait, that was Adolf Hitler. Might not have been the ideal person.
Oh, boy. You know what?
Considering he cursed Charles for stopping the Muslims. Because if it wasn't for that, then he would have been leading a Muslim army. And he knew that the Muslim army would be more willing to follow him, hook, line, and sinker.
I think it would take some research. But that would be a really good live stream to have, is to say,
like an alternate history. What would have happened if Charles wasn't there?
Yeah. So little plug here, my novel, the Healing Stone, does delve into time travel, and it is medieval, and it is not contemporaneous with El Cid, but it is contemporaneous with another defender of faith in this book. That is good. So I want to, Thomas also had a comment. He said, I want a Kingdom of Heaven meets Dracula crossover movie.
The Kingdom of Heaven needs to get its act
together. My gosh. That would be, I don't know, man. That would be tough. But it would be a fun crossover. Yeah, so we have all these. We have this list that we're going through with these guys. We're going to look at each one, but we have to ask before we get started, what was the culture like that these guys were in? And we're going to be doing individual cultures through each one. But part of that is wanting to know from us, how much do people actually know about this period? So we took a poll. And in the poll, it asked, how familiar are you with the historical conflicts between Christianity and Islam in the Middle Ages?
I am depressed.
Why?
Very familiar is below not familiar, but curious to learn. Holy cow.
Very familiar, 14. Somewhat familiar. You know what? I would have said that a lot of people feel this way. I wouldn't put myself on the top of this. Very familiar. There's so much. Yeah, I've studied this. I don't know if I would say very familiar.
I'm more familiar with the early
yes,
conflicts.
the earlier conflicts with Islam. I would like to become more familiar with it because it does bleed into there's
there's so many parallels to today.
It is with that. And so part of what we're doing now is to bring some light into this, especially since one of the accusations or reasons given for Christianity, say, well, I don't want to, Christianity has been violent. What about I was going to say insurrection. It's not the insurrection. Inquisition. Thank you. What about the Inquisition? What about the Crusades? And maybe they'll throw a couple other things in there to say that these are the evils of Christianity. Now, whenever you have a war,
bad things are going to happen.
Bad things are going to happen.
Kind of in the nature of war.
That's why one of the reasons why you want to avoid it, right?
Yep.
So, like with the Desert Storm, wasn't it Desert Storm? We had the Abu Ghraib scandal where you had prisoners that were being tortured, and so forth. So that stuff's going to happen, and you're going to have people point at that and say, that's why you're evil. That's why you're bad. Yes, that's evil. Yes, that's bad. Yes, that should not have happened. But, and I'm not justifying that particular conflict. I'm just using that as an example to say, even if you have well-meaning conflicts and well-meaning intentions, right? And you go through the just war doctrine, bad things are still going to happen. You're going to have civilian casualties. You're going to have famine, follows war, pestilence, all that kind of stuff goes with it. So unintended consequences too. Never pretty.
But sometimes it's got to be done, even though it's not the ideal result or the ideal situation. It's got to be done.
But the West has largely forgotten this history, I believe. When we look at it, it's just a bad stain. So, like, I wonder. I'd like to do an on the street poll with people and ask, what do you know about the Crusades? And probably a lot of things that they would say would be that it was misogynistic, that it was colonialism, that it was evil West going through and doing this. It was evil Christians going to do this, and they would give a list for this. Were there some things that should not have been done? Yes, and we'll cover. I believe when we get deeper into the book, we'll cover some of those.
That'd be an interesting video. Just ask the question. Don't debate them on it. Don't try to correct them, but just ask. Hey, do you know what this is? What do you know about this?
And ask them when it happened, because I bet you a lot of people wouldn't have the dates right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And who started it?
Who started it? Why did it start? Those sort of things.
So let me ask, I see there's some more comments here and I'm going to get to in a minute, but I'm going to ask you guys in the chat. Do you think this conflict is still relevant today? So I'm talking about the historical conflict of the West during the Middle Ages between the years the 7th century to the 17th century. Do you think that those conflicts during that time still are relevant today? And while you're thinking and possibly putting up an answer, I've got another one here. It says the difference is that Jesus condemned the Inquisition. Muhammad.
He condemned the concepts behind it. I would say that some of the things behind the Inquisitions,
right,
would have been condemned. But obviously, Jesus was not around during the Inquisition.
Right. I don't think it's
saying,
right.
No, this is a bad idea. Stop doing this.
Probably the conviction of the Holy Spirit during that time. He probably did.
But
Muhammad would have probably taken notes and implemented his own Inquisition.
Oh, he did. He did. Just look at the whole situation with Medina with the Jews. The purification he did. He literally brought him up it made a trench right down the center of Medina, and things fell in that should have stayed upon the top of their shoulders into the ditch. This included his own future father-in-law, which he then married the daughter of the man that he did that to, as well as women and children as young as can be possible to the age of puberty, including checking to make sure if they started puberty.
Yeah. Now, one of the big arguments back against that would be, well, what about what happened in the Old Testament with Joshua taking over the land and so forth? I think that's a good question, but I think it's also for the sake of what we're covering right now, we're going to table that for another time and look just not the Inquisition. Look at the Crusades themselves.
Sorry,
Focus
if I
on
may
that.
just on that topic real quick. Vast difference from go wage war here, stop this one group to, oh, these people surrendered to me, gave themselves over to me. Now I'm going to do this mass execution, which is what happened. Was they surrendered, and then he did this because they didn't immediately surrender as soon as he walked up.
Right. Well, and so I do have a comment from Thomas Hall. He says the prevailing mindset today is that all cultures are valid and equal, and they don't consider what it would actually be like to live under another civilization, particularly subjective. I think you're 100% correct there. It was the idea of, I guess, maybe relativism that's crept in for the last 20 years or so.
Moral relativism, yeah.
To say that, well, you might be able to say that some cultures have some good, maybe all cultures, most, I can't say all because I don't know all cultures, but most cultures have some good aspects to them. Let's take possibly one of the worst. Let's take the Aztecs. Book in this series covers the decline and fall of the Aztec Empire. Those guys were bad.
Were very, very
the
bad.
Culture and the people performing those human sacrifices and so forth, it was outrageously horrendous. The number of deaths, just even in one day,
it's hard for someone in the West to even comprehend.
Right, just to make the sun rise the next day. So, was that culture good? No, it was evil. All in some way, all cultures are evil because we're all fallen. But was there anything that was good about that? Their architecture in terms of working with water was really advanced. Was it hydroculture and other things? They were basically living on a swamp, and they converted that into this city. They call them floating gardens, but they weren't really floating gardens. They weren't really floating, but they were gardens. And it was amazing what they were able to do without the wheel. They didn't even have the wheel. True. Or metallurgy.
I'm still waiting for something to come out of Islam that is productive for humanity.
Okay.
Because all those scientific miracles they claim.
Yeah.
All those scientific discoveries. No, you go back through it. They're actually just stolen. They're stolen. It's like stolen valor. They just take it and then try to pass it off as their own.
So as Islam was coming, conquering, converting by the sword, so on and so forth, you do eventually have men that stand up. And I say eventually, I'm sure that there were people at the very beginning that were standing up as refusing, but I'm talking about like kingdoms that said, back, we need to organize and push back. This is the encroaching is going too far. And so that's what this book is about. In the words of the author, 8 men who were driven by something greater than themselves, devoted much of their lives and went to great lengths. Most of them died in their 40s and 50s to make militant, if not desperate, stand against Islamic aggression, specifically Islamic aggression. So this is another question for you. Why has this history during this period been ignored or suppressed?
Because we've been told to be ashamed of it.
I think that's a big part
because the West has been told that it was evil for Christians to defend themselves, so therefore you shouldn't do it. But then again, you look at some of these of what has been reported as far as the pilgrims that went there ahead of them and everything. And I could not imagine a Christian reading those reports, hearing what's going on, saying, no, their culture is just as valid as ours. No, that definitely should have put any decent man would have the fire put in their stomach.
Yeah, and even, by the way, those who say that every culture is valid, they disagree in the same breath, because they'll say that there's, for example, I'm not saying everybody says this, but the patriarchy is oppressive and it needs to go away. Well, is that not a part of a culture? Is that not most cultures who are based on what they would say is a patriarchy? So how can they interpret it that way? One of the reasons I think that it has been sort of oppressed, or at least avoided or not looked at, is because it makes it difficult for Christians to defend fighting back if we take a totally passive stance to say, no, there is no place at all for fighting, warfare, nothing at all. It also feeds the lie that the religion of peace is misunderstood. I'm waiting for a reaction.
Ever since 9/11, that's been the preaching point that I've heard. Ever since they twisted it. And look at the sources and no, they did exactly what they were told to do.
So I think this is wishful thinking by Westerners and propaganda by jihadists who say, "Oh no, we're just peaceful like you." We just did a review with Hatun on the life of Muhammad. It was a cartoon. Half of it, yeah, because it was the life of Muhammad.
It's up now, by the way.
Yes, it is. The life of Muhammad, for talking about him, and it looks almost like a picture of Jesus, with being peaceful, and you got the Good Samaritan situation going on here, and so many other things. Oh, it's just as instructive to hear that shifting, that lying about him, as it is to see what was omitted in the story, like Aisha. And
oh yeah, there's so much. It's just pure propaganda. Western Muslim propaganda is what it is. Because again, those sources that we're getting these stories from, that we find are extremely embarrassing, that Muslims want to cover up, were written by Muslims. They're the ones who put these stories together because they're the only sources we have from that time period that we can verify, because the other historical people around the area didn't write about this Muhammad dude.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a big gap that leads some to say, to even question if Muhammad actually ever existed,
because there's no external sources, historical external sources verifying it, like you do with Christianity.
Oh yeah, we definitely do with Christianity, with Romans writing about how they want to kill Christians. You have Jews who hated Jesus writing about Jesus. You have Romans writing about Jesus's life. You have these verification that we can look outside of the Bible,
resurrection, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, not just in the Bible, but external sources as well. Yeah. So put this quote up here real quick. It said, a piece of you here, a piece of you way over there, standing at the well.
Yeah, that'd be about right.
Religion of peace. Now, there's some humor there, but of course, in reality, not at all. So why has this history been ignored or suppressed? Well, we got what we just talked about. There's also toxic masculinity. Oh, that's bad. Those warriors there, they were masculine, and masculine is necessarily toxic because they were being aggressive. It's also the patriarchy. They were xenophobic and
they don't get it. Muslims don't get
sarcasm. They think that, yeah,
they think you're literal. No, the answer is no. There's a place for violence being turned to something. As long as that is the point of it, there's a place for violence. There's a place for defense. There's a place for aggression where it's needed. Yeah. If someone comes up and starts beating my wife in front of me, and my reaction to that is, whatever, I'm passive about it, I am not a good husband.
No.
In any way, shape, or form.
No. So there is still, we did talk a little bit about this last week with the just war debate. We could look at it again to say passivism versus a time of aggression. And take another look at that, because Jesus did say turn the other cheek. We'll be getting to that in a minute. Can you be violent and Christian? Is there ever a point where you can? And you just brought up an example where that would be the case. Jesus did say turn the other cheek, but what did he say about swords? Sell your cloak, buy them.
Go sell your cloak, go buy them if you don't have them. We have 2 swords here. That would be good enough.
Yeah. Let's see. He Al-Qazi. Yes, there are external sources. The Christians of Najran.
The sources you're referring to are very questionable. If they're actually existed. Well, not that the Christians didn't actually exist. It's just that the sources were actually from them is highly questioned because, again, that goes through the Muslim sources.
Right.
So you can't say, well, you see these Christians here in these Muslim sources say that it's legitimate. Therefore, it must be legitimate. Okay, no, it's still through a biased source. I want a completely unbiased source, or even better, a hostile source.
Right.
To it. Like we have with the Roman governor of Turkey, who was writing saying, we need to kill these Christians. Here's what they're doing. They're worshiping Jesus, and that comes from right at the end of the 1st century. So about 100 AD-ish.
So that's an external source that is hostile, and more than likely not going to want to. Yeah, definition of hostile. Not want to agree with that. So in the other term, pacifism too, like we said, if we're going to be looking at just war, and I'm going to bring this up again. If we're going to look at a just war and to say, now this, you would not see this in Islam because just cause in Islam is going to be totally different than it is in Christianity. It's defensive measures, legitimate authority, probability, access. All these things then would be applied to it. Let me go back to my notes.
Yeah, they do have their own sort of rules of engagement, at least occasionally, like guidelines can be violated at a given time. It's just suggestions. Definitely between Muslims, it's different. Between Muslim and the infidel, it's definitely much different requirements. But we'll dive into that more later.
Right. So the clash is real. It has been going on since the 7th century. And you would see the clash coming in different forms over time. Sometimes you have physical aggression. You do have that happening in Syria right now with Christians being killed, executed during ISIS. Crucifixion. Who does crucifixions now?
Muslims.
It's
Islamic caliphates.
Right. And the Roman Empire has long been gone. Crucifixion as a means of execution has essentially disappeared in the West, but not in Islam. It is a form of execution. So next week we're going to be looking at the first dude in this, and that is if I put his name up, that Godfrey of Bouillon. And
interesting character.
Yeah. Each one of these is its own twist and turn. And again, we're going to start with the historical background and then go from there. Let's see. We have we're doing, and then I had the list of others that we're going to be doing after that. If you enjoy this channel, please like, subscribe, and share. And if you get a chance, this is a good book. Pick it up. It also comes out in audio form.
Jeff, I also have a question.
Audiobook? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying
there before we wrap up.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, but why did the West open the borders to Islam when they are in a millennial conflict? What changed?
Infiltration, stupidity, and negligence.
The idea that the cultures are compatible, and if the goal of Islam is the establishment of Islamic law, Sharia law, that is not compatible with Western thought and or democracy or representative government. They are in conflict with each other. So, I mean, there's plenty of examples of that. We can look at that up. Okay, was that what you were talking about?
Yes, that was it.
Okay. So I appreciate that's a great comment. But if you do read that, and if you enjoy that, and if you enjoy also fiction, you can grab this book too. This is in the description. Good science fiction story. There is conflict. There is battles. There's the Reconquista that the book goes over some of that's going on. It's specific battles that happen in history. The whole point of the Healing Stone is that it's a science fiction, just an enjoyable story, fiction story with it. Then if you don't mind, thank you guys for all your comments. And if you'd like to put some more comments then in the description once we're finished, we'll look forward to seeing you next week when we do this guy. And then we follow through the series and then talk more about just war theory as well. Thanks again for your time. We'll see you then.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.